and very pleased to be joined on the phone now by Dr. Tommy Weir, who will be speaking at the Leaders in Dubai conference on the 28th, 29th of October. Good morning to you in Beirut, Tommy. Thank you very much for joining us on the line.
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
We will talk in a moment about the leaders in Dubai, but first of all, let's talk about your recent book, which was called The CEO Shift. It's a snappy title. What does it mean?
Basically, it is giving CEOs advice, or kind of like a memo to CEOs to say, now that we're coming out of this recession, what do you need to be doing?
What do they need to be doing?
They really need to understand that there's 5 fundamental shifts they need to be looking at. Number one is a market shift, and HSBC is pretty much leading the way in that regard as they're moving their CEO to Hong Kong in February, recognizing that 72% of the world lives east of the Mediterranean, and looking and saying maybe we should actually focus our attention there versus in the western regions or other areas. Or if you're speaking in the Emirates, realizing that the 3 billion people that live across the body of water called the Indian Ocean aren't probably going to come into Dubai. They should be going out to them. Number one is the market shift. Number two is a growth shift. And realizing that the emerging markets, and specifically India and China, are still growing at about somewhere between 4 and 6% the rate of the West right now. A speed shift, a talent shift, because the workforce is going through the largest transition in history. Is fundamentally different than it has ever been before. And then finally, a leadership. They need to recognize that the approaches that we've used for leadership in the past are not going to work with today's workforce and tomorrow's.
You've obviously got some fairly firm views on the shape of the world's growing population and its effect on business, and you talked about the shift there to the east. But the purchasing power of that part of the world is still well below the West. Do you think that's going to change quickly?
It's changing very rapidly right now. I mean, you're seeing the West purchasing power is kind of staying. Well, actually, it went down a little bit last year, but in the previous years, it's starting to stable out. And you're seeing the purchasing power grow 20 to 30% as you look into India and China right now. You're right; it's still way behind. But when you look at the fact that they grow by 151 people per minute, and the West grows by 2 people per minute, the math starts playing out, and you're starting to see companies do reverse innovation, recognizing that what's classified as urban poor, the people who live on less than $2 a day in an urban setting, actually are making purchases now. And if they want to be competitive in the future, they need to start figuring out how do they market to the bottom end of society, and then bottom end economically of society, and then let it grow upward.
Tommy, I understand that your book was published in December of last year. So it is a credit crisis book, but of course the economies have shifted further since then. How relevant is it still?
That's very interesting. The majority of the book was done before the crisis even existed, okay? And it's been quite interesting. It's actually more relevant now than it was before, because organizations are beginning to realize that what went on is very different. The crisis is making a lot of organizations think, and if you just take Financial Times, and if you go from September 15th of last year forward, every single day it talks about companies moving into the emerging markets.
If you were to update for a second edition, what would you be adding sort of 8-9 months on?
I would clarify the picture quite a bit of what is going on there. I would give a lot more examples of who's doing what, because a lot of people have taken efforts in the last 12, 13 months on this. And I would spend a lot more time really going more practical into what does the difference in the workforce mean.
Now, a lot of the CEOs, although we know changes going on around us, have struggled to adapt, and many have actually stuck their head in the sand as well to ignore what's going on. Now, in the video on your CEO Shift website, you talk about the effect that getting glasses as a kid had on your life. Now, what's the business relevance of that story?
Yeah, I thought life was normal before I got glasses. I didn't know what I didn't know. Okay, so I'm going on and I'm living life, and I didn't know that every kid could not see the board like I couldn't see the board. I didn't know that the ball leaving the pitcher's hand, he couldn't see it till it got to home plate in baseball. I had no idea what I didn't know, and when I put those glasses on, I found out the world was really, really different. And going into what you just said about CEOs having their head in the sand, it's kind of funny. We think we can ignore the world, and if we ignore it, it doesn't mean it's there. So we don't know what we don't know. We don't actually go interact with who the market is in India. We send some people to go do this, but then their views are skewed instead of really understanding who that consumer is and who those insights. So the relevance is basically this. The CEO has grown up with an understanding. He doesn't have the right glasses on today, so his view is skewed. It's an incorrect view of what's going on.
Now, you spoke recently at the Dubai School of Government and said that most of the CEOs in the GCC are not prepared to lead their companies out of the recession because many of them are simply waiting for it to go away. Now, that's tough words. Is that as damning a statement about Gulf CEOs as it sounds?
It's a damning statement. Obviously, it was said as a wake-up. It was said to, it kind of shakes some interest there. But I really do think most of the CEOs in the region are hopeful that things will go away and they'll come back to how they were. And they're really holding back. I can listen to them and they'll say, no, we're just waiting until things turn back around. And I'm like, things aren't going to turn back around. I could probably go a bit broader. I was speaking to the geography. I'm not sure most CEOs are prepared to lead their organizations into the future right now.
So what will you be telling the CEOs who are attending Leaders in Dubai at the end of this month?
We're going to take those 5 shifts that we just spoke of briefly there, and we're going to walk through why do they really matter, how do they matter for you, and what you should do for it.
Now, you lived in Dubai before the crisis happened, and the stunning expansion and construction here redefined your expectations of growth, as did market returns in Asia compared to growth in the US. Now that we live in a different, more subdued world, do you feel perhaps duped by what happened back then to change your expectations? I mean, you've certainly had to scale back expectations. Do you feel we were all led astray?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, finances were the liquid aspect of society, the financial, the availability of funds, led us into trouble. Clearly into trouble during that. That's not new in history. It just was bigger right now. Okay, we know from history that any time that funds become too available, we end up in trouble in the back end of that. I mean, we can look at things that have happened in the States, Europe, other parts of the world, other emerging economies. Duped? No, it's reality though. I mean, you sit here and you go through these, and I think when funds are available and everybody's making money, everybody hopes it lasts, and then elements correct. It's reality. It just happened to be really big this time.
Now, you're in Beirut at the moment, and you were quoted last week by Beirut's Daily Star newspaper as saying lack of vision is the main obstacle preventing Lebanese businesses from going into the global market. Did you mean lack of vision in the business community or in Lebanese government and politicians?
Actually, that they changed a word in my quote, okay? I said their biggest variable is lack of leadership, period. Okay, but they made it a lot nicer. And I was speaking politically when I said that. Then we went on, and as we were talking about vision, as we were talking about the business community, I said the lack of vision. So yes, and politically, it's a lack of leadership, period. In the business community, it's a lack of vision. Very few companies here actually are focusing on markets outside of Lebanon right now, outside of their geography.
Obviously, we do have quite a lot of Lebanese listeners here. Do you think that the Lebanese companies themselves do have potential to expand outside their borders?
I do. I think some of them do, yes. If the banking sector here would recognize, instead of sitting back, the banking sector is kind of a cat's meow right now. The whole world is looking at Lebanese banking sector and saying maybe we should learn from them. So what they're doing is sitting back and saying, hey guys, look, we did good. If I were in their shoes, I would be saying, hey guys, let me help you and let's expand now. Let's partner. Let's do something outside of here. The banking sector, there's a few other companies here that have the opportunity to expand outside as well. And one of my referenced in that would be Patchy Chocolate.
Sorry, can you expand on that?
Patchy Chocolate has actually been listed as one of the 5 companies for 2000 emerging market companies of 2009 that has the potential to go global. Their product is competitive. They're just going to go through some very strong, difficult moments as they recognize how they expand globally is very different than how they expanded in the region.
So that's unnamed a what? Is it Patchy, P-A-T-C-H-Y, or Apache?
P-A-T-C-H-I.
Pachi.
And they're all over Dubai.
Dr. Tommy Weir, who's going to be speaking at the Leaders in Dubai conference at the end of this month, and who is the Vice President of Leadership Solutions, Connexa. Thank you very much for joining us on the phone this morning.
Thank you.